good at being formal anyways.
Awesome. Okay. Cool. So, Coach Mike Powell, Executive Director of Beat the Streets Chicago. Thanks for being here today.
It's an honor. Thanks for having me.
Awesome. I figure I'd start off with kind of a fun fact that maybe you're not aware of. You're my only guest on my show that is on the same website that my dad is on, which is the Wrestling Hall of Fame.
Okay.
Website.
All right. Very cool.
Your
dad's in the
little different
Illinois
age group. So
yeah.
I think his year is 1963. D2 for North Central All-American.
Oh, I remember you telling me that. Yeah, very
147. Cool. Yeah, so it's interesting to me as I learn more about Beat the Streets and also have experienced a lot of the things that you're doing. That the meaning is different for me, I think, because I was also raised by a coach. Right.
Yeah.
And I understand the impact that wrestling can have and the impact that coach relationship and just how important it is to kids going through the program.
Amen. I don't need to be here.
Yeah.
You could.
Yeah. So the podcast is called 10 Listens, but I'm just going to talk about you the whole time. But in watching some of the times of you interacting with with the teams, one of the things I've heard you say is, talent is not something that you can control. That's something that is given to you. But being effective is 100% part of your control, or 100% in your control.
Interesting.
And I thought that was cool. It reminded me there was a movie, Bronx Tale, right?
Yeah,
De Niro's the dad. He says nothing worse than wasted talent.
Yeah.
And that line, I saw that movie too young. That line has stressed me out. I'm wasting something. Is there something I should be doing better?
It's good that you're actually listening to it, right? Like
yeah. But that's a movie, right? And this is something that my understanding is part of how the program has come together. So, Beat the Streets, Chicago. Would love to know a little bit about the origin, kind of how it came together, how you got involved, kind of your role in it, and then would love to dive into how it all works. So if we can start.
Yeah, I'll speed through the beginning because I think how it works is the fun part.
Even better.
But I was asked in 2017 to join a board, and I'm using quotes, right? A board call. And it's just a bunch of high school coaches that were on the Beat the Streets board at the time. So Beat the Streets had existed since 1994. Okay. And it had like a heyday where Beat the Streets moved from Evanston. It was part of the Midlands Youth Foundation, the big wrestling tournament that is smaller now, but is still around. And ironically, the guy that is our managing director now actually founded the Midlands Youth Foundation when he was a coach at Northwestern. So it's come full circle.
Really?
A guy named Brad Traviola. He's a national finalist at Northwestern. He's a great guy. So we hired him he's less than a year in, but he's awesome.
Awesome.
But it's been around. They then moved into the city and they started basically city wrestling, youth wrestling at various schools. And then about 12, maybe 13 years ago now, one day at like 5 o'clock on a Friday, CPS announced that they're dropping all middle school and youth athletics in Chicago public schools. Like just cut it all, right?
Yeah.
Just because that's smart, right?
Yeah.
Like it's like if you're gonna
forget about character building.
Yeah.
So math. Yeah.
Anyways, Beat the Streets then kind of was fledgling and struggling, and my first call with them was essentially a bunch of high school coaches cursing each other out. And I called the guy, Dan Willis, who ended up being our board president, who's the head coach at Chicago Hope Academy. His entire team is Beat the Streets kids now. They just made the Elite Eight.
Yeah.
They just had their first state finalist ever. It's, like great things are happening. But I called Dan, I said, can I curse on here?
Yeah.
This is a shit show. Like, I'm not doing this. So he said, hey, one more call. Just join us for one more call and see what comes of it. So I ordered the book Nonprofits for Dummies, and I came prepped with a bunch of questions, and most of them they couldn't answer. And then the last one was, who's your executive director? And I had just told my wife, like I was ending, a really good run at Oak Park. We were the number one team in the country, won multiple state championships. I had a really rewarding career, and more importantly than like the wins and losses, I saw all these young men grow up and go to great schools and become great adults, and so I was essentially. I've done everything I have ever wanted to do. I coached the national team. I did all this stuff. And I said, I'm kind of looking for another challenge. And so this kind of presented itself. So I said, who's your executive director? And they said, well, we don't have one. I said, another 15 minutes went by and I said, hey guys, if you'll make me the executive director, I'll do it for free. But you got to give me carte blanche. We have to bring in some real people, and say, we've got to build a board. It's probably not going to look like what it looks like. And everybody was on board. And the guys that weren't were frankly kind of probably time to go anyways.
Right. Yeah.
So we just, we brought in the beauty of what I had been able to do at Oak Park was I kind of straddled that line. Oak Park borders the west side of the city. If you were a good kid from Chicago, you came and trained at Oak Park for free. So there's a kid named Nate Smith who went to Austin High School, who's a professional fighter now, is fighting in the UFC. I think he's actually going to come back and coach with us. Awesome. So we're working on that right now. But Nate, he was an ambitious kid. He took the L to Oak Park 4 or 5 days a week. He traveled with us. We paid for everything. We made sure, Nate was like one of ours.
Yeah.
And so I had some street cred in the city.
Yeah.
But I lived in Oak Park, so I had lawyers and accountants and nonprofit gurus in my network of Oak Park wrestling. And then I also married well, so I belong to a country club, and there's this. I'm a professional fundraiser now, so that's really beneficial.
Yeah.
So I ran in all these different circles. I could go to the South Side and have a conversation with the coach from Kenwood Academy, Carlos Latimer, and me and him we're equals. We're boys. But I could also do that with Jason Stroyman, who's now our on our board from Oak Park Country Club, and so it was just kind of things worked out very well. And we exploded. And we went from essentially 25 kids that were very poorly served. When I took over, we were $3,200 in debt. We owed Dan Willis $3,200. And my first clinic I ever went to, there was 14 kids there, and 13 of them were little Huskies from Oak Park that I brought. There was no parents in the stands. The gym was a wreck. The mats weren't down when we were supposed to start. And I was like, all right, guys, square one. This is never going to happen again. If we're going to do it, we're going to do it right. So we created some values that we live by. We really focused on bringing excellence to the city in a way that they haven't seen. And it's nothing against city guys, right?
Right.
So disinvestment from urban athletics across the country, probably across the Western hemisphere, right? Has been in just catastrophic thing.
Right.
So for a guy like me, and I grew up in Oak Park, or I grew up in River Forest, but even more affluent, with two parents. Yeah. But I was an at-risk kid, and I didn't connect with a teacher between 8 and 3. I didn't have a history teacher that changed my life. I didn't have a math teacher that took me under his wing to help me get to college. I had 3 men who were wrestling coaches. Yeah. And I had these guys that were in my youth coaches who were pivotal in me becoming a man, to getting to college, to getting through high school. I'd be a carpenter right now. I would be a world-class carpenter, but I wouldn't have gone to college.
Yeah.
And so I have this incredible debt of gratitude to these men who for pennies decided to stay and mentor me from 3 to 6 o'clock. And a lot of times from 3 to 8 o'clock, and then, from 3 to 10 o'clock on Friday nights, then all day Saturdays. Right. And these guys that supported me and followed me and pushed me and loved me. And so sorry, I'm kind of all on a tangent here, but what that experience was stolen from the city for 40 years. When you take all the coaching stipends away, when you take every wrestling room away, when you hamstring coaches, they can't put anybody in their car anymore to drive kids around. There's all these rules and no money here and no support here. And unless it's a basketball school or a football school, they could care less about athletics. They're dealing with so many other things in Chicago public schools, right? So what we've seen is all the great coaches left, all the great opportunities left. There were no youth clubs. The league that Beat the Streets used to run, 25 or so schools, was gone. Well, we have rebuilt that. We have 27 schools in the SCORE program this year. We just had 500 kids in this league that we put on in Chicago public schools. Wow. So our job, in my mind, was to reinvest in the city, reinvest in city kids and create opportunities, but not the way you see in the city right now. There's a lot out there that is we create a safe space for 2,000 kids. And as a former educator and coach, my question is, that's great. What do you do when they're 18? You kick them in the butt and say, good luck, kid? Right. You know what happens after that? 6 months after that, while they're wandering the streets, some guy in a Cadillac Escalade rolls up and says, hey, dude, what are you doing?
Right.
get in the back. You know what I mean? You want some nice shoes. You want a good phone. You know what I mean? It's like you need direction. You need
Right.
character. You need like grit, right? You need to know that there's a world available to you out there that you didn't otherwise know about. And so, what we've done in terms of like the excellence piece and bringing real value is we're not creating programs. We're creating life-changing programs. We just hired an Olympian. So I don't know when this is. What we're about to hire a guy named Jesse Thelke, who was #1 kid in the country coming out of high school. I mean, the guy's a superstar. Wrestled at Wisconsin. He's a Greco-Olympian, multi-time world team member,
Wow.
multi-time. He's a world medalist. And word from Ellis and Greedy Coleman, who wrestled with him, and Pat Martinez, who works for me now, is he's probably a better coach than he ever was a wrestler. So
Wow.
we have Larry Early, who's a D1 All-American. We had Mike Boyd, who's best coach in the city, and he's still kind of with us. He was our head coach for years. And Alexis Rivera. We just hired a guy named Matt Cavaleris, who's doing great, who wrestled at Wisconsin. We just got a guy who was a college coach named Ben Rosen in. And so our goal is to create what we've done. I shouldn't say our goal because we're accomplishing it as we speak.
Right.
Is to create opportunities for any kid in the city that wants them. So if you walk out of your front door or the front door of your school, you should have access to really high quality sports programming. I'm not talking about rolling out a soccer ball after school.
Right.
I'm talking about coming to a place where you are brought into a community where, in our trilogies, trust, love, and truth, right? Where trust is built, where you learn to love each other, right? And where you really learn to be part of a community that has values, that has expectations, that you see, our values are accountability, gratitude, grit, integrity, and excellence. And in every room you walk into, that's what you see. And that's what our coaches talk about. And that's what our coaches model. And so there's a kind of a set of expectations that, they have in Naperville.
Yeah.
Because of all these resources and all these great coaches around, all this stuff. And it's like, you walk into the Naperville Central Wrestling. I don't know what it looks like, but I'm sure it's awesome. Yeah, I know what Glenbar West.
Intimidating. I wrestled there.
So I know what Glenbar West looks like. It looks like a college wrestling facility.
Oh yeah.
And then you've got 6 or 7 coaches on stipend, and you've got a girls coach, and you've got this, and you've got the buses and all these things that the city just kind of hasn't have. So we've created that, and so now you have excellent looking facility. We have world-class facilities. We have world-class coaches. We have really high expectations, and it hasn't been easy.
Right.
Because if you're in the city, it's okay to be late. It's okay to show up without your shoes. It's okay to not do this or need this or that. And then, so we've tried to create a culture that's changing that. You know what I mean? If we start practice at 6 o'clock, your shoes are tied. You're on time. You're expected to work hard. You're expected to stay after and do extra. Your parents are expected to get as involved as they can.
Yeah.
And if they can't, we're going to find ways to, supplement that. But I'm rambling. Is the goal was from the onset in 2017, 2018, create something that was really excellent and was different than anything that was available to city kids. And that's what we've done. And the results on the mat and more importantly off the mat are showing that now.
Yeah.
And so COVID killed us. COVID just crushed us, but what we raised $2 million for a facility, built a facility right next to Midway Airport. And in June of 2021, we opened, and we now have 3 of those facilities that have classrooms, exercise rooms or weight rooms, and wrestling rooms. And so we do the full suite of things. Kids get picked up, they get tutored after school, they get fed, they have practice, and then they get shipped home.
Wow.
And we have vans at all the locations. It's an awesome situation.
That's
so
incredible.
I can go into all that, but
yeah. So I'm not following any particular format, but
good because I'm all over the place.
Good. But it's something that was curious to me that really kind of resonated. You mentioned in different Western suburbs, Naperville, for example, there's a set of expectations of these kids, and and I grew up in a Western suburb. It's like going to college is what you do. I didn't even think about it, right? The other thing that I've kind of noticed, I coach as well, coach soccer, a little different thing on the burbs. But sometimes when there's a cool opportunity like this, how are you getting the kids into the program? What are some of the things that sometimes you'll see a great opportunity, kids like, I'm not interested in that. So how might you explain maybe that recruiting process or how that works?
It's interesting. So I think there's two parts of that. The first is we hustle a lot.
Yeah.
You know, there's it, and when you create something really special, people talk about it.
Yeah.
So our parents are our best recruiters.
Yeah.
It's really easy to recruit kids from the neighborhood when parents are on the soccer field saying, "What are you doing in the winter? You got to meet these guys. You got to come to this facility. You got to see what's going on here."
Yeah.
And that'll pull kids in. But we do guerrilla marketing. We do gym class takeovers. We probably do 40 gym class takeovers a year where we send our coaches. You know, our coach, we are Latino coaches to go the Latino neighborhoods. The black guys go to the black neighborhoods. You know, so we go into the neighborhoods with guys that can relate, that look like the kids, that can speak to the kids, recruit them. We send them home. We get their mom's phone number. We text mom. Hey, if you don't want us to text you, let us know. But otherwise, we'd love to tell you about this program. So we do a lot of that kind of ground level marketing. We, you know, a lot of Facebook paid ads and Instagram paid ads and things like that. But I think the other thing that's really important to note is if you are from Naperville and you think about the west side or the south side of Chicago, we're doing our gala piece this year on a guy named Roy Phelps from Englewood, who just made the state finals. I mean, literally broke a glass ceiling, won an epic match in the semis, come from behind, saltoed the guy to pin him. Roy is 5'7". He's a heavyweight.
Right.
He doesn't look like the guy you think I'm describing. He's heavy.
Yeah.
But for 9 years, he's been with Beat the Streets longer than me. He has bust his butt. I mean, he's just. And so what you have is, and Roy is, you know, I interviewed him for this video we're doing. And one of the things he said is, I laid in my bed one night and I'd seen what's going on in the neighborhood. And he made sure to say, hey, listen, there's a lot of good things happening in this neighborhood. And there's a lot of good people. I'm sitting in his home as he's telling me this, right, in Englewood. Yeah. And he said, but I had seen enough that I just decided I don't want to be there. And from now on, I'm just going to be with Beat the Streets. And so there's a ton of Roy Phelps. My saying is there's a Roy Phelps, there's a Monica Griffin on every block in the city. And they want to belong. They want to excel. They want an outlet. They're not available anywhere.
Yeah.
They're just not there in the city anymore. And here's my favorite story about this, right?
Yeah.
Muhammad Ali got his bike stolen in 1950, whatever, right, in Louisville. And he literally this is a true story, he's kicking rocks, cursing down the street. And there's a cop outside the Police Athletic League boxing gym, you know, throwing darts, smoking cigarettes. And he said, hey, kid, what's wrong? I said, man, somebody stole my bike. And he said, well, come in here and hit the punching bag and get your anger out.
Yeah.
That moment, because it existed, changed civil rights history,
right.
African-American sports history, boxing history. And
all of it.
You know, you think about the impact that moment led to. Those moments don't exist anymore. There is no Police Athletic League. The Y is a shell of what it used to be. The Boys and Girls Club is a shell of what it used to be. There are no opportunities like that. And they're not. And because of the way sports have gone and the for-profit model and the for-profit coaches, I mean, you know this. I mean, if your kids get good enough at soccer, they get you. I just tried to sign my 10-year-old up for a year-round soccer thing and said, but can we only do 1 or 2 seasons? And they said no. And by the way, he hasn't made the team because he has to try out. Right. And I'm like, so wait.
$100 to try out.
So I have to pay for the tryout. Yeah. It's $2,800. Yeah. I'm like, wait a second. Like right on the league, it says like youth develop on the website, youth develop and all this. So he has to quit all sports, you know. So anyways, sports has gone to this model of if you can pay to play, if you have a mom with a minivan who can drive you there, make sure you're doing your homework on the way there because it's 45 minutes on the way to practice, 45 minutes on the way. I mean, you think about city kids with single parent households, that doesn't exist. Yeah. You should be able to just go to the gym. You should be able to walk down the street and go to the gym and find the people that found Muhammad Ali, right? And that made him into who he was or started him on that journey. That's what we are. So that's what we are replacing that, you know, need, which is much different. Back in the day, the Naperville gym didn't look that different than the inner city gym. Mm-hmm. But money has come into play, right? And capitalism has come into play. And now even in the suburbs, it's a haves and have-not things. But the city is left to wallow. There's just nothing available. So, you know, I'm off on a tangent, but that's essentially our job is to find the Muhammad Alis, the kids that want to be something, the kids that want to work hard. And there's so many of them, right? And then because of the nature of wrestling, because this is not baseball, man. I mean,
Right.
you are going to cry, you're going to bleed, you're going to sweat. This is hard, right? Your character is going to be forged in a fire, right?
It's very personal.
Yes. It's so I can go into why wrestling is special, of course, but
Yeah.
but the there are kids that want to be part of that, but because they've never been part of anything that substantial, it's so easy to quit. I mean, wrestling is
Right.
the easiest sport to quit because it's like, dude, I'm not going back. That guy slammed me. I was bleeding out of my nose. It's the hardest thing I've ever done. So it literally is our job, our coach's job. And Pat Martinez, our wrestling coordinator, just texted this to Jesse Thelke this morning. And I'm on a text stream, said, your job is to immediately build trust and love with these kids so that they have to come back. So they feel that necessity. And now when Roy Phelps feels like he's part of a community, where he feels like he's beholden to coaches, he's accountable to a community and to the adults around him. And Roy's had, I don't know, 30 meaningful adults in his time at Beat the Streets. At any given time, there's 12 people thinking about Roy Phelps, pushing Roy, and somebody's on his grades, somebody's on this, he's anyways. Taking that, getting him to go on this trip to Pennsylvania or this trip to, he went to Azerbaijan, he went to Israel with us, so you think about those very kind of deep and meaningful relationships. Now, when things get tough, you can't quit.
Yeah.
And that's the key for us. So getting them in the door is one thing. Getting our hooks into them is another thing. And then my saying is, win the mom, win the kid. And so you've got it. And whoever that person is, whoever's the easiest person at home to say, it's okay, you can stay home. We need her or him or they or whoever it is. Yeah. No, sir. No, sir. This is good for you. You're going to finish what you started. We do hard things in our family. You know what I mean? And so when you get mom to say that, then that kid can't turn around. He's nowhere to go. And so now there's 7, 8, 10 years of hard work in the wrestling room. There's sacrifice. There's discipline. There's all those values. There's all the character building. And then there's 50% of what we do is off the mat. It's what we call enrichment, experience-based enrichment, meaning taking kids. We just took a group to Ernst Young, and they built resumes, and they did the tour, and this is what we do in this department. We just flew girls out to Spokane, Washington. We just had a girl take her first plane ride. She had never left Chicago before this, and now she's been to 10 states. She just wrestled her first national tournament, went 3-2, and I'm sure she could have done better, but she's not quite ready for that stage. Yeah. She's my favorite kid in the world, DJ. She just called me and said, I lost my cell phone that you gave me. I give her my cell phones when I get new ones. So I'm going to go buy a new cell phone. So she fell off the bus. I'm like, all right, man. So I'm trying to adopt DJ. My wife is, we're working on it. But so DJ is my favorite kid in the whole world. Not that all of them are, they're all pretty much equal. But, when DJ asked me for a new phone yesterday, I said, fine, screenshot your grades. And she did. And I said, this isn't all your classes, screenshot the rest. And so she did. She has a C in one class, everything at 1B, a 1B plus, and all the rest A's. Wow. I said, when that C comes up, you get a phone. She's like my kid almost. So, but that's all, their grades are checked every week. Really? Their family life is checked every week. Their social emotional status is checked every week. And we have a whole system now. So we categorize every one of our kids. So we'll serve 4,500 kids this year. About 2,500 will be exclusively ours. We share kids in summer camps and various things with other clubs and other communities, suburban kids. We're good enough now that the suburban kids want to come train in the city.
Yeah.
It's very cool.
Yeah. I'm ready to sign up.
There you go. But we categorize kids, wrestlers, impact wrestlers, high impact wrestlers, and what we call 360 kids. And Roy and DJ are 360 kids. And right, so they're kids that 360 days a year, 360 degrees around their life. We know mom's middle name. We're intervening in, and not for necessarily for these kids. I don't want to put them on blast, but homelessness, mental health issues, domestic violence, real, food insecurity, real heavy things I cannot tell you about, right? Yeah. And we are dealing with those anything, it's some teenage pregnancy, whatever it is, we're dealing with it at all times, 24 hours a day. It never goes away for these kids. We'll have about 250 of those kids this year. So each one of those kids gets on something called an accountability squad, and they're given 1 or 2 adults that check in with them every single week. And when when something is flagged, they send it up the chain to Layla or Adam, who run our enrichment department, and we go into action. Is it mental health? They haven't applied for college yet. They haven't got their FAFSA in yet. Their neighborhood high school doesn't have a wrestling team, or we're not real fond of the coach. We got to move this kid from here to here. This kid's getting bullied at school. This kid's mom is having mental health issues. So all of these things come about, and we deal with all of that off the mat, so that the full child is supported, the whole child is supported.
Wow.
And really so that we can get DJ and Roy, when they're 18 years old, ready to take on life. And we're not going away. I mean, Roy's going to be with us till he's 30. I tell the kids, you don't get to leave beat the streets until you're making house payments, your car's paid for, and you're a good father or mother. And then you can come join the board. Then you got to give back, coaching or otherwise. But we'll follow, Roy all the way through college. We'll support him all the way through college. He's a senior now. He's deciding where he wants to go. He wants to be a lawyer. And so long and short of it is the experience that these kids get now is I think it's unique in the nonprofit sector. It's unique in the wrestling world. But our goal is to make life champions, and I think we're doing. I'm confident that's what we're doing.
Yeah, it is. It's an impressive commitment from the organization, because a lot of times you see, here's our thing. We do the after-school wrestling program or whatever. What happens outside these doors is something else. That's incredible. So you mentioned accountability. Adults or check-ins or partners, and are those folks part of Beat the Streets?
Yeah, coaches.
Coaches.
So
okay.
Everybody's a coach at Beat the Streets. You're called a coach, because I believe being called coach is one of the most important things that you could ever be called. And I believe that the role of coach has been diminished in society a little bit in a really unhealthy way. Some of the pedophilia stuff, just teachers and coaches, it's kind of been knocked down pegs that, and 2 or 3 generations ago, you went home and said, coach said this, and dad said, or mom said, so do it. And now it's like, let me call that coach, So anyways, we honor coaches, and we believe they are very important, like my coaches were, like every one of our, like your coaches were, right? I mean, everybody's got a teacher or a coach who was instrumental in their lives. And so that our coaches are those people, and we honor them that way. And we set them, we have a coaches we call it, coaches university, and we train them to be those people. And so yes, all of our coaches, but all of our full-time coaches are part of these accountability squads. And those are your kids. So those who you coach at the tournament, mostly you're checking in with those kids. If you're going on a trip, those are your guys or girls. Coach Sammy Barrientos is our female coach. She's got a big squad because she's got huge capacity, and she's an unbelievable mentor. And some of our younger guys, maybe have smaller squads with kids that are a little bit less needy, or So I'll give you an example. DJ needs a lot of work. Okay. She needs a lot of check-ins. She needs a lot of work. DJ is working hard to beat the streets as we speak. So she's with Sammy. Okay. You get a kid like Evan, who's at Duke right now. He needed to check in on sports psychology once in a while. He's got 2 parents at home, so he was, he was with Justin, who Justin is phenomenal. Yeah. Justin's our marketing guy. You've dealt with Justin. He's also a coach, and so he was with Justin. I think he was with Justin, but Justin's much younger, so so we set it up for success, and then we support those young coaches. And Layla and Adam are really pretty special people. So Adam wrestled for me, played football at Northwestern, and so he really gets the coach-mentor relationship. Layla was a female wrestling coach and a master teacher. We stole her from the Berwyn School District. So we have good people that run the enrichment department. So
that's awesome. I mean, the fact, I'll go back to the fact that everyone's a coach, because, a lot of the listeners of this podcast I've got, traditional businesses on here as well. We're always talking about people development and how you build effective teams. That is a secret weapon right there.
I like that. Thank you.
I mean, because also the personality that resonates with that, it just adds, anyone who has ever coached or had a coach, specifically anyone who has ever coached, it's a tremendous responsibility.
Yes.
Right. And, what I always think of is, when I was a player, a wrestler, soccer, whatever, I can name every coach I've ever had.
Yes.
And I'm fortunate.
And you can remember the good and the bad things they said to you, right?
Just going to say that I was fortunate enough to have a lot of good, right? But I also remember, the hard stuff. And there was, in the work I do, we're often coming into a company as outsiders, and all of a sudden, we're the experts on whatever this is. And there's always people in the organizations that are just as smart, just as talented on the thing. But when it comes from someone from the outside, it's different. And I've always, my brother used to tell me this. He'd say, yeah, we're moving dirt in the backyard, right? And we're getting ready to load it. He goes, yeah, turn the wheelbarrow around the other way before you start loading it. I'm like, well, that's smart. He's like, yeah. He's like, Dad has probably told you that, but you're going to listen to me and not to him.
That's right.
And I think the same thing is with coaching. There's a lot of information, especially when it comes to building character, that you can distribute, and it comes from a place of trust.
Yeah.
In fact, when we first started sports with my children, who are now 10 and 13, my daughter's going to be 11 next week.
Nice.
I didn't want to coach. I love coaching. I didn't want to coach them because I wanted them to have the experience of somebody else.
Amen.
Pushing them around, right?
Love it.
Now I do coach them because we went through that phase, and they kind of get it. They treat me different on the field, and that's
that's good. That's important. That's hard to do.
It is hard to do.
That's
I'd like to
balance.
think it's
That's
working.
a tough
We'll
balance.
see. We'll see. Maybe I'm doing it all wrong. So that's incredible. So we kind of got through the origin story. We started talking through some of the examples of how the program works. One of the things that I've heard some of the wrestlers in the program say, and watching just kind of videos of people talking about these, you guys do an amazing job of capturing a lot of that.
Thank you. Kudos to Justin.
Yeah. So one of the wrestlers says, Coach preaches the journey. And that was brought up a couple times. And I'd love to know a little bit about the journey and what that means.
So we really emphasize a growth mindset.
Yeah.
This is all the research by Angela Duckworth. I assume you've read Grit.
Yes.
Or
absolutely.
Carol Dweck and a growth mindset. So the greatest, John Wooden had this figured out in the 1970s, right? When you read, and I studied, I read every John Wooden book there was when I was a young coach. He had that figured out before they put like catch terms to it.
Yeah, before it became a consulting.
That's not in our control. This is in our control. It's the old Stoic philosophy of focus on the controllables. And so it all is related. The journey is we embrace all the nicks, all the scars, all the hard times, all the growth, everything else, but we're just constantly growing. Yeah. We don't think about outcome. We don't talk about outcome, and it's hard when I do the first Coaches U pretty much every year, and it's like we don't say the words win.
Yeah.
We don't say you get these D1 college guys like, what are you talking about? Like Cale Sanderson doesn't say that to his guys. The greatest wrestling coach in the John Wooden of wrestling, right? This guy's he's either on his way or has already passed Gable, right? In the Mount Rushmore of college coaches, but he's an Olympic champ. He's a 4-time undefeated national champ. This guy's a special human being. All he does is say, "Oh yeah, we lost that one. We'll see you in the room on Monday. We'll figure it out." And, it's like he's like, we're competitive. We like winning. We wrestle hard. But he talks about gratitude. He talks about growth. He does not talk about outcome ever.
Yeah, ever.
Neither does anybody else. And there's this, you think about these guys and these, you see a track runner, think Jesus afterwards. Yeah. And I'm a mostly secular Jew. So this is just an observation. It's not in any other way.
I'm following.
But when your only job is to, however they phrase it, glorify Jesus with your effort, then you're only focused on your effort. You're not focused on outcome.
Right.
Let's say it's a secular view and you're talking to any sports psychologist ever, right? There's no NFL guys, there's no NBA. Every sports psychologist at this point is preaching the Stoic philosophy of focus on the controllables. This is in your control, this is not. And for wrestling, they're much better in other countries than we are.
Yeah.
It just win, just do this, just do, it's all outcome based. And everything they see on social and all this is about what you're what are you attaining? What do you have? So our job literally is to unlearn that in kids, is to kind of reteach a mindset. I think Roy is a great example of that. I think DJ is on her way to that. Yeah. DJ would go like catatonic when she would lose a wrestling match. Like she was inconsolable for an
Yeah.
hour or two. Like we had to pull her out and throw her back on the wrestling mat. You know what I mean? For her like next round when she would lose. And now she's learning to lose. What did I do? How do I get better? And she still has her moments, you know, but the idea is you're just, you know, it's 2 steps forward, 1 step back. You're just on a journey.
Yeah.
And the journey doesn't end at 14 at the state tournament, and it doesn't end at 18 at the state tournament. It ends when you take your last breath.
Yeah.
And until then, you're just getting better every day. You're becoming a better father. You're becoming a better human. You're becoming a better student. You're becoming a better student of the game in the sport of wrestling. And so that's what we, you know, it's a case study in what the best people are always doing and always have done. They've always had it figured out. And you know, now it's just available to us in a way that it really frankly wasn't. For me it was, and I was a super talented, super underachieving college athlete, and it was because of sports psychology. I couldn't move my legs on the wrestling match in big matches. I couldn't move. I was just paralyzed. And I was a D1 All-American, you know. So people, you know, you can read my, but I was way better than that. I was, you come to the wrestling room, I didn't get scored on. I beat All-Americans 100-0 in practice. If I had wrestled them in a competition, they would have beat me 3-2 because I couldn't function. And, you know, like, so it was just get tougher, Powell.
Yeah. You
need to figure this out. You know, and I don't know if I would have bought into it, but like, you know, 2 or 3 generations ago, that didn't really exist it was just get tougher.
Right.
It was just, you know, he'll either figure it out or he won't.
Right.
Or, you know, that type of thing. And now it is read this book. You know, and the first book I give young coaches is The Obstacle is the Way by Ryan Holiday.
Oh, yeah.
And it's, you know, it's kind of cheesy, but it is the Stoic principle of this is your control. And there's all these examples and all these stories. And you start looking at it and you go, wait a second, this guy got it and this guy does it. And, you know, so I can ramble on and on about this, but it's a really important thing for me in that Tom Ryan at Ohio State has it figured out. Tom Brands at Iowa has it figured out. Mark Manning at Nebraska has it figured out. Cal Sanderson has it figured out. The high school coaches, some of them have it figured out.
Yeah.
The youth coaches, it's a bunch of dads with neck tattoos, living vicariously through their kids, thinking they're going to die if their 9-year-old loses a wrestling match. And I'm exaggerating here. There's a lot of guys that aren't like that, but you see it on the soccer field, you see it on the hockey rink. Doesn't matter where you see it.
Yeah.
It's not filtering down because you have to choose to learn and be disciplined enough to adopt this mindset.
Yeah.
Unless it's taught from you at a very early age. So I am on my soapbox about this all the time because we have youth wrestling and we're getting good. We had 109 state qualifiers this year. We're getting good enough, you know, and I don't know how many, 48 all-staters, you know.
Wow.
Yeah, 9 state final. We kick butt. But it was awesome, dude. And we don't do it because of wins and losses, right? We do it to build life champions, but it is a symptom of excellence. So, so it's as I'm watching these dads at these youth tournaments, and then, you know, blow up, and can't handle their kids' losses, and you know, it's like, man, you just want to talk to all of them, and for at least, you know, we can because we don't control those other guys,
right?
But our guys, and we don't necessarily control what they do either, but we control the inputs they get and the expectations that are set, and to give a personal story about this, I have been talking about this for years. Right, I discovered this when Ellis Coleman, who was an Olympian, you know, at 20 years old, was the best wrestler in the state, hands down, bar none, at any weight, and didn't win the state championship because he just melted in the quarterfinals.
Really?
And I was like, I've got to figure this out. I'm failing these kids. You know, I've got to. Tons of trauma. Really rough West Side kid. Just kind of spilled into Section 8 housing in Oak Park. You can look him up. He's got great stories. He's an amazing human being. He's a great dad now and everything else. But I failed Ellis on the sports psychology front. So I studied and I did, you know, so from about 2009 on up, I learned and I got better and I got better. And by the end of my tenure as a coach, I was much better at it. But then I had my own son. And I had been coaching all these parents and all these kids for years and years and years. And my son lost a wrestling match and didn't try hard and then threw a fit afterwards. And I lost my shit.
Yeah.
I snapped. Afterwards, my dad's like, dude, you know what you look like? you pulled that kid by his arm off you look like the guys you talk about. I was like, oh man, so it's like, so yes. So now I finally I have been coaching parents and kids on this for so long. Just do this, I think the biggest single factor is separating yourself from outcome.
Yeah.
And that's it. Back to the journey.
Yeah.
And so now my son came to me. He lost at the regionals, his final match at the regionals. And he said, it was a bad call. He had a really bad call. And he said, Dad, I had the takedown right. I said, yeah, but that's not important. Super proud of your effort. And he looked at me and he said, I'm going to start crying. But he said, I gave it everything I had. And I said, I love you. Pinky, I call my wife Pinky. Pinky, get this man some ice cream. It's like so I'm not I'm finally to that place, and so I appreciate how difficult it really is.
Yeah,
it takes discipline.
Yeah,
we need a cultural shift in the United States, big time. Big time.
Well, and it's by example, the institution that you're building, because it is an institution, right? It's more it's more than just
of course, yeah. I like that. I'm gonna steal that.
But what is really interesting, something I was going to bring up, and then you just did by way of that story, which comes back to the power of the coach, the power of wrestling specific, what I want to dive into, but then also how challenging that sometimes can be for a parent to deliver that same message, right? Because the journey, and it's not about outcomes. When it's a parent to a child, the child, especially a great parent, the child is used to that parent looking out for them. So they don't hear it that way.
Right.
They hear you trying to make them feel good for them not achieving that outcome, right? It's
interesting.
It comes across like that.
Yeah.
You always said I messed up. You're always saying that. Don't worry about it. Try your best.
Yeah.
I'm just proud of you.
Yeah.
I heard that all the time growing up.
Yeah.
But when it comes from an outside person,
it's crippling for a parent.
Yeah.
Right. So we had a couple generations of child psychology that told you had to rescue your kids constantly.
Right.
And now it's the pendulum's swinging. Things are changing a little bit in that you've got to let if your kid, I do this with my son. My older son is very emotional, and he'll beat himself up. It's go take a walk outside.
Yeah.
Come back when you want to have a real conversation, because I'm not interested in your self-pity. Yeah. I say things like that, and I think it might be a little on the harsh side, but I'm not going to do that to my kid. Right. I'm not going to hamstring my own kid emotionally. You know what I mean?
Right.
I'm sure I'm doing it in other ways, but I'm not going to do it that way. So, but you're right. I think a great coach can say things to kids that parents can't.
Yeah.
The key is to become a great coach. The key is, if you're a youth volunteer youth soccer coach.
Yeah.
If anybody who's listening, put some time and read some books and watch the interviews with Cal Sanderson or whoever the great soccer coach is, or whoever the great baseball coach is, and think about their mindset and adopt, and so part of what Europe and Eastern European countries and, the wrestling countries, Azerbaijan and Kazakhstan and Russia, they have professional coaches. And we have volunteer coaches.
Yeah.
And that's one of the good things about the for-profit model. Although I think a lot of for-profit coaches aren't necessarily good coaches, right? Is there might be a difference in quality there. But if you are a 10-year-old soccer coach, I think you know that you should feel some responsibility that or at least know that there is an opportunity for you to be profoundly impactful.
Yeah.
Right? And not just a guy.
That is awesome to hear, because it's, and I think being a coach is also, that itself is a journey.
Oh yeah.
I'll tell you, our season kicks off next week. That's going to be a different season as of this morning.
Good.
I'll tell you, the word that hits it is profound. A profound impact.
Here's what I tell young coaches.
Yeah.
35 men text me on Father's Day.
Yeah.
You don't coach for championships. You coach so they remember the thing they were. And I love the saying. They don't remember your words, but they remember how you made them feel. Oftentimes they remember your words too.
Right.
But that's the most important thing for a coach is build something in kids that they're going to take with them for a long, long time.
That is incredible.
Yeah.
So we said a couple times, we'll talk about wrestling later, but I think that's probably a good segue into it as well. So the sport of wrestling and how it's playing a role in the journey that you're bringing the youth into and helping shape character. How might you explain why wrestling? I mean, obviously it's your vocation, so that's one reason.
I'm ready for that. I've answered this question a lot of times, and I'm not blowing any smoke here. I truly believe what I'm about to say. My saying is, all sport is great, wrestling is king.
Yeah.
There's nothing like wrestling in the world. It is half sport, half martial art. It's half discipline. The life of a real wrestler is this monastic, life of sacrifice.
Yeah.
And frankly, pain. And the training to be, whether you ever are, reach your goals, but setting lofty goals in the sport of wrestling involves sitting at the lunch table while your friends are eating, whenever they eat pizza and curly fries, eating kale and chicken breast, right? Then you go after, I'm thinking about a high school student athlete here, but for 2 hours, you do the hardest workout anybody's ever done in the history of the world in a room that's 95 degrees.
Yep.
And then you put on your sweats and you go for a little run afterwards because you got to make weight on Friday. And then you go home, then you eat kale and chicken breast or some version of that again, and very small amounts, right? And then you have to do your English work.
Yeah.
Right. Then on Friday night, after you make weight, you put on a bathing suit, essentially. You go under a spotlight and you get your ass kicked at the hands of another human being in front of everybody, right?
Yeah.
And then you have to shake hands like a man or a woman, walk over, shake the other coach's hand, and walk off that mat with dignity.
Yeah.
And then there's a whole nother piece of, I'll get to the coach-player relationship, right? But there's this discipline, there's a grit, there's hard work, there's toughness, there's things that really we know, like there's real science behind what that does for you later in life now. The single biggest determining factor in people being youth growing into successful adults is the word grit. Can you grind day after day over time? That's what wrestling teaches you, right?
Yeah.
But it also teaches you that humility, teaches you how to lose. It teaches, and it is the vulnerability of losing a wrestling match in a wrestling singlet in front of all those people, having there's nobody else. You can't say the guard didn't block or this idiot.
Yeah.
So you walk off and you are forced to be self-effacing in a way that fosters growth, right? It's this incredible vehicle. And then you have the player-coach relationship. And I say this, total kind of tongue in cheek, but it's the only sport where the coach can put their hands on a guy.
Right, yeah.
You actually train with your coach.
Yeah,
you wrestle your coach, and you're on the mat with your coach, and your coach is slapping you on the back, and there's this like intimacy in the player-coach relationship that you don't have in baseball or soccer or football or anything else. It
100%.
doesn't exist. When you break in a wrestling practice, and you're just at the bottom, you're just in the wallows, right? You're at the depths of despair, and you've been there, right?
Yeah,
It is hard to sit there in a dark room afterwards with your coach, with your sweats on and his sweats on, and you just looking and having an eye-to-eye conversation. That is the moment where your dad can't do that for you, your mom can't do it. There's nobody else in your world that can be on your level at that moment and really get to you and build that trust, love, and then most importantly, tell you the truth.
Yeah.
This is where you got to. You let your grades go, so you're stressed out. You didn't watch your weight. You did this and this and this. This is what we're going to do going forward. I'm going to be here with you the whole way. We're going to do this together. And then, so my thing was, yell at them while building them up, right?
Yeah.
And at the end, it was, break them down. And then it was always at the end, we're going to kick ass.
Yeah.
I'm going to be with you. This is the community you're part of. Our expectations are this. We're going to do this together. This is going to get better. And when you leave here, you walk out that door. When you walk in, you walk in that door tomorrow, you are a different man with a different perspective and gratitude for your opportunities. This isn't a burden on you. You are blessed. And, so I do all these things. So, those moments with the player coach in wrestling are very unique. And unless you have been a real wrestler, you cannot appreciate that.
Yeah.
Because wrestling breaks you down so bad and it leaves you so vulnerable. And sometimes that's not at a practice. Sometimes that's after a match.
Yeah, absolutely.
Where you put your heart and soul out and you get taken down in overtime. And it is just brutal. And I remember a guy named Jason Kelber who beat Terry Brands in the NCAA finals for Nebraska. He was my college coach. I had a terrible Big Tens. I didn't qualify for the NCAAs. I'm a returning All-American. I had a busted up shoulder, but I really was just being mentally weak and used that as an excuse. So they give me a wild card, and the coaches come back and said, "You got a wild card," and I said, "I don't think I deserve it." And Kelber waits till everybody leaves. He goes, "You know what?" And he just lit in. He was a player's coach.
Mm-hmm.
He had never yelled at me before. He just lit into me. "You have no gratitude. You know how much talent you have. You know how many people wish they were in this position, were given this gift." And it completely, it crushed my soul.
Yeah.
And then about 24 hours later, I resolved, I'm going to be grateful for this opportunity. It's just, he completely changed my outlook. I'll never forget that moment.
Yeah.
And in times of despair, I have thought about that time and time again, how important that conversation was. And I ended up, frankly, I thought I had a bad call away from being an All-American. I ended up being in the round of 12. I lost a really close match to be All-American again.
Yeah.
And so I had this incredible NCAA tournament, despite the fact that I was 8th at the Big Ten, and so, and it was because of what this man said to me.
Yeah.
But that goes so much deeper than wrestling. It was so profound in my life and so important, and it still is. It's one of those things we talk about. You never forget how they make you feel, the things they've said to you. So
100%. And I think also with youth, you're hitting on a major aspect of the difference between wrestling, right? Is the coach and the ability to get in there with the kids, because I think in any leadership, whether we're talking about business leadership or coaching or etc., when you're that relationship between the leader and the folks that you are leading or growing or coaching or grooming, there's a belief that, does he or she understand what I'm doing, right?
yes.
And so you see a lot of this in the corporate world too. Like there's bosses that are bosses that have been there for a long time. There's the boss that can do it just as good as you can, maybe even better.
That's right.
But they're putting the time in to help grow you to that level versus showcasing themselves. And I think what is so amazing with wrestling is the coaches are on those mats rolling around. It doesn't matter what kind of, that's the other interesting part. It doesn't matter what kind of shape they're in.
Oh yeah.
Like, I remember we had a coach named Coach Mitchell, and he used to tell us about the time that he wrestled a bear. He'd say, it's like he didn't use his hand, he used his whole paw, and he'd break you down. And then one time he did come and he showed a picture of him and the bear. He did it at some carnival. It was all muzzled up. So like we thought he was just telling us, some old man stories as we saw it. But there's that relationship of demonstrating, especially when you're pushing people, to be a part of that push, to sweat too, right? Sweat as well. And you just don't see that in a lot of other sports opportunities, right? A lot of coaches got the mock turtleneck on the sideline,
right?
The playbook, and they're supposed to be intelligent or whatever.
Right.
And not to say those aren't wonderful coaches as well, but it's just a different.
They don't even have the opportunity to do it.
They don't even have the opportunity.
Coach K can't play basketball at 50 years old with those young bucks. Yeah. But if he was a wrestler, he could actually get on the mat and still show technique, right? In a way that, like, where there is that, it's like that forced intimacy, and it's just such a healthy thing.
And it builds that trust. And was that the first item on your build trust?
Trust, love, and truth.
Yeah. So, it all makes perfect
well,
sense.
Well, if you're gonna say the things to a kid that you really want to say to really move the needle for her or him, trust is number one, right?
100%.
So.
Fascinating. So I want to make sure, because this is also interesting too. So as I got introduced to Beat the Streets, anytime I've talked about it, somebody else in the room knows, is involved, or it's unbelievable. I was in a meeting about the parade in LaGrange a couple of weeks ago, and I think I mentioned this. I mentioned that as somebody's asking about the podcast, I said, "Oh yeah, I got a Coach Powell executive." Like, "Oh, my brother just joined that." Like, blah 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 blah. So it's just far-reaching. It's everywhere. So we've talked a lot about some pretty irrefutable evidence of success of the journey that you're putting people on. I don't think people understand, I certainly don't, how we go from worn out gyms to some of the best facilities the city has to offer. I've met a lot of the people involved in your team. So I know you've got amazing people, but how does this all work? Where's the funding coming from? Where's the, I would love to, you mentioned bringing kids into Ernst Young and working on their resumes and stuff like that. So it's clearly there's relationships with businesses in the community and that sort of thing. I'd love to just know a little bit of some of the inner workings.
So it's kind of like a two-headed monster, right? So there's the fundraising marketing side of things.
Yep.
And marketing is kind of in the middle.
Yep.
But then there's the programming side, and our goal is to be excellent at both of them.
Yeah.
And so we run a nonprofit, just like the Soup Kitchen or any other nonprofit you think of.
Yeah.
We're almost exclusively privately funded. I mean, we have some family foundations, but we're very little federal and state funding, which is great given the current times.
Yeah.
Although we are definitely we're definitely going to be hurting because of the current times. That's a real thing, and we're preparing. We're tightening the belt, and we're preparing for that. But we're wrestlers. We take it as a great challenge.
Part of the journey.
Our gala, our gala is going to have 800 people at it. Our goal is $850,000. We raise a lot of money to create opportunities for Roy and DJ that they otherwise wouldn't have in facilities that are world class with coaches that are world class. And if it's DJ's time to get an opportunity to go to the national stage, we make sure she goes on that trip with a world class coach, flying for her first time. Everything's paid for DJ.
Yeah.
Charlotte, who went with her, who is also one of our superstars, but is from a more affluent family, she paid a little bit of her way, but everything is subsidized that we do. Charlotte paid a significant amount. I don't know how much. I shouldn't speak to that, but pretty much everything. Every kid is subsidized, even if they're coming from Oak Park. We just don't charge. We don't believe in charging, for-profit type fees.
Yeah. So
we raise money, but most of the money that we do raise goes toward inner city low income kids.
Yep.
And so our job is to create life champions. We don't create life champions. I always have to correct myself. We create a pathway, and a culture and a community, but the kids create the kids do the work.
Yeah.
So that's
an awesome distinction you just made.
Yeah. We can't do the work for them, and we use the phrase grit over gifts. We don't give gifts. There's no free backpacks. I mean, we do that stuff.
Yeah.
But you come here, you are expected to sacrifice and work and build and change and grow. This is not, again, this is what like you said, it's very different than we serve 4,000 kids, we roll a ball out to them.
Yeah.
They hit the punching bag or whatever it is in the youth-based sports. And that's a very important thing. Having a safe place, having exercise, being around positive adults, that's really in it. We also do that.
Right.
But as you get more and more involved, our job literally is to be involved with every aspect of your life to help you move that in your. So that's where that money goes. So our 360 kids, I think the number is 17 times more costly than a kid that just wrestles. So we invest so much in the overnight trips, and overnight trips doesn't sound like an important thing until I tell you this. DJ had never had a birthday party before her 13th birthday. She'd never. I'm for sure going to call her if I keep saying this, right? She'd never blown out candles on a cake. She'd never been given a birthday gift. She'd never traveled outside of Chicago. She'd never been on an airplane, right? So now she's been to 11 states. She swam in a lake in a state park in New York last year. She trained at Michigan. She did a campus tour at Michigan, was with the administration or the admin people at Michigan. Then she did the same thing at Cornell, then at Boston U. Then they went to Fenway. Then, and on the way to Cornell, they stopped at I forgot. They did the Maid of the Mist at Niagara Falls.
Wow.
And they ran to the top of the mountain, did a workout, and then watched the fireworks over the falls. And that, until you realize that DJ had never left the west side of Chicago. Yeah. Because you and I have experienced all that stuff. It's like second nature.
Right.
A world has opened, a world of culture and opportunities and future has been open to DJ because of Beat the Streets and her commitment to Beat the Streets and our commitment to her. Right. That's where these resources are going.
Yeah.
That she now knows there's a world out there that's available. There's a place at the table that she didn't otherwise know existed. And you might have to kick somebody out of that seat. You might have to horse somebody out of that seat and take it for yourself. But it's available to you now. If you're willing to work for it, if you're willing to be gritty, this life is available to you. That is what we are after. What we are after is permanent, profound change that is generational.
Yeah.
So that DJ's family is different going forward. That Roy is going to create opportunities for his children, that he and his parents are wonderful. Roy's got 2 parents, and but that was not available to him for whatever reason. So that's where the money goes, and that's what we do. So we have full campaigns. We have a capital campaign right now for our 2 new facilities. We have full sponsorship, and we do all that stuff. We do a lot of individual donors. We do donor dinners where we introduce people, invite them to come in, and so we run it like a foundation or anything else that you might run into who asks you for money. We just do that while also kicking butt in the sports and enrichment world. So, and then we, Kathy Yen and Justin. Kathy really has been our marketing person. It's crazy because she didn't have much background in marketing, but Kathy is an extraordinarily gifted human being, an absolutely brilliant person, and she is a hard driver. She is a hard woman, a hard worker, and she accepts nothing outside of excellence, which I just, I'm so grateful for. She basically taught herself marketing. So like our square, our Beat the Street Square, which is probably the most recognizable symbol in all of Illinois wrestling at this point. Right?
First thing I said when I saw you walk in here, I saw it from across the room. My vision sucks. I saw that.
We're hoping that Chicago never calls us out on trademark infringement for the stealing half their flag. But what Kathy realized is that all these other Beat the Streets, there's 11 Beat the Streets, they all had the skyline in. And so she said, I've got this friend that's a real graphic designer. She said, here, bring to this. And the lady's like, that's so trite. Get that out of there. Nobody, it's not, you need something bold. You need this. And so Lisa, Kathy's friend, produces this for us. And that's kind of the beginning of some really impactful, I think we're ahead of the game in terms of marketing and outreach. And I think it's very, Coach Sammy said, probably a dozen people in Spokane, Washington came up to her and said, we see what you're doing. Yeah. We know what's happening at Beat the Street Chicago. We appreciate what you're doing. And so that speaks to Justin and Kathy's work. It speaks to the new website that you guys built us. And we've gotten great rave reviews about that. That's true.
Fantastic.
Story. I'm not blowing smoke, but so we've taken that part very seriously. And I think it's alongside all of the heavy fundraising and the personal relationships, it has boosted both sides of the coin, in that it's helped us with fundraising, but it's also helped us with promotion and just kind of being out there in the greater community, and then also in the wrestling community.
Yeah, you're doing a fantastic job with the branding and the marketing. And I'll tell you, the other day I was driving, I forget what area I was in Illinois, on the expressway, and the car drives past me.
It's got a Beat the Street sticker?
Yeah.
Love it.
As I was like trying to hunt, what do I do here? How do I acknowledge this? And you guys can see me going like this. Probably some, awesome wrestling coach in there. That's fantastic. So also, Chicago has to do something with where we happen to be located.
Yeah.
How does the relationship with the city kind of play into, or does it, the Chicago community?
The city, we kind of steer clear of bureaucracy.
Yep.
We partner very closely with Chicago Public Schools. It is very much a love, not always love relationship.
Yep.
And because it's difficult, because red tape is difficult and everything else. So we try to stay nimble. We applied our aldermen in Garfield Bridge down by Midway, helped us with a micro grant. It was like 100 hours to prove how we used it. So we turned it down the next year. It's like, it's not worth the 25 G's that we get, So, so anyways, there's a little bit of that. But in terms of like the city, we embrace the ethos. We very much model ourselves after what we consider the best parts of the city. It's a gritty city. Yeah. It's a city of real work, and the history of the back of the yards, and the Pullman railroad car, and the city was built on the backs of amazing human beings who really humped, and so that's kind of our ethos, and it's very much it's intertwined in everything we do, and I think people feel that and appreciate it, and we I've kind of talked about some of the struggles of being in the city, and there's a lot of them. But there's just amazing people in the city
Yeah.
with great work ethics who want to belong to something great, and strongly desire this. So our city guys,
Yeah.
are the municipal workers, the moms that grew up on the west side or the south side, and the cops and the firemen and everybody else in between, right? So the railroad workers or whoever it is, they take a lot of pride in what we do.
Yeah.
They take a lot of pride in wearing our symbol around, and how we are helping to be part of their kids' childhoods,
Right.
and so that's a super important thing. There's a family, EJ and Ethan. There's 5 kids in EJ's family. He's the oldest. I think he's 11 or 12 now. His mom was like kind of not around. Now she's like our number one cheerleader. She rocks, beat the streets every day.
Oh.
She told me, Coach, if EJ gets out of line, you can beat his ass. And I was like, I'm not going to do that. But there's some real trust there, She's like, you do what you ever got to do. Make sure this guy's. And so, but EJ's grades have gotten better. He's
Yeah.
like, and he's going to be a superstar.
Yeah.
So we're already talking about what high school he's going to go to, and he's made it to the state tournament this year, and his little brother actually placed in the state tournament.
Yeah.
So just the pride she has, I think, is indicative of a lot of, and I don't know if that's even answering your question, but there's kind of like that Chicago pride.
No, it is. It's
and there's so much bad, where you live and where I live, there's so much bad things being said about the city. And there's probably good reason for a lot of that. But there's so much good left in the city. There's so many awesome people, and there's so much good that's happening that we try to highlight that and honor that.
Well, that's great to hear, because one of the things I've experienced being a business owner in Chicago, and also in this podcast in just general, and I work with a lot of business.
Yeah.
Is it's an extremely supportive community. There's a camaraderie around here that maybe it does exist in other cities. It probably does.
Yeah.
But for whatever reason, it feels like there's really a rally behind it here. People want to help each other.
Interesting.
Is something that I've noticed. And there's kind of a community for everything, right? So we do a lot of work in the tech community, right?
Yeah.
There's a tech event any night of the week here, right? You get involved in something like the nonprofit community, right? Is really interesting. Like, you and I know a lot of the same people.
Yeah.
And I didn't realize, and it's funny, I was talking at coffee with Bob Muzikowski.
Oh yeah, the man.
Yeah. And
he's like a mentor of mine.
Yeah.
He's an amazing guy.
So I didn't know that. And I was like, you know what? I know some of you should probably, the amazing story over there. That just kind of went on and on.
So he started Chicago Hope.
Oh yeah.
Their team made the Elite Eight this year. We think they could be in the state finals next year. That's where Roy goes to school.
Really?
All of their kids are Beat the Streets kids.
Yeah, that part I learned in my conversation with him. I haven't had him on the podcast yet, but so we got that kind of community effort, and I want to pair that with, because it's going to go out to a lot of Chicagoans communities. There's not a person that's going to listen to what's going on at Beat the Streets and your approach that isn't going to have some form of, boy, I wish I could get involved with that, right? And I think we downplay the side of donations, because that sounds like the easy out, but it is, and it's important.
We run on money. It's like fuel for sending our Kel to Azerbaijan.
Yeah.
It is. So that's the single most important thing we do in terms of this conversation. Yeah.
Yep. And I know that there are ways to do that on the website. The gala's coming up. that is the hot ticket in town.
It's awesome. Our gala's awesome.
Unbelievable.
It's super fun. No rubber chicken. You're not sitting at a table with people you don't know.
Yeah.
You get to meet our kids. They're dressed to the nines. They practice for months on how to talk to people in it. So they present. They present, not falsely, how awesome they really are. When you meet Gigi or Arkel, they're just like, they're amazing kids. So
yeah, it's unreal. They were greeting everyone at the doors. They were working the room, and it's a beautiful event. In fact, the only negative about the event is I had to tell my daughter I didn't buy the Taylor Swift signed guitar. I came home after this thing, and I brought a crew of guys with me, and that was the big question in breakfast in the morning. So how's he? Oh, it's unbelievable. Did you get the Taylor Swift guitar?
That was a costly item.
But in terms of other ways that people can get involved, so you mentioned different companies are doing things. How are some of those relationships made? I know a lot of business owners that would love to open their doors to anything that they can offer.
So we do a lot of like, I'm going to draw a blank on what Blanca calls it, but corporate social responsibility work,
Yeah.
where they volunteer with us, or we go to their workplace and we bring kids. We also we're getting better at corporate sponsorship in terms of that, but it's very easy when you're St. Jude's.
Sure.
Right. So every time I'm asked to round up, I'm like, how do we get one of these? This guy's got to be hundreds of thousands. So, but when you're like a mid-tier group and that's a wrestling club, it's easy to, but we have 4,500 kids in Chicago. We're getting there. So, but we do a lot of, we're working very hard on kind of breaking down those barriers to corporate relationships. And, Frontenac is our,
Yep.
good-sized private equity firm is our sponsor at the gala, is our presenting sponsor at the gala. So we have quite a few really healthy relationships with financial groups, banks, some groups, Gatorade, and some other groups. But I think that, so we would love to get involved one way or another. We have a person that we hired this year specifically to focus on corporate relationships.
Awesome.
And we started an advisory board whose their whole job is corporate relation, a significant portion of what they do.
Yeah.
So it's getting better that way. But our big thing is individual donors, and telling and kind of spreading the word, and our the 4 T's in the nonprofit world are time, talent, treasure, and ties, right? So you can dedicate time, right? So you can volunteer. We have ample volunteer opportunities. You can give talent. Do you have like you guys did, and help us with a design on a website or something along those lines? We have accountants that help us. We have lawyers that help us. We have coaches, so mentors. We have a whole mentoring program, so that's a real thing. Ties are connections. I believe in this organization. I believe in their mission. I'd like to introduce you to so-and-so, which is what you're helping with us with right now. And then treasure is, how can I contribute? And I tell people, if you're going to do nothing else, become a monthly donor. If you're not going to come to the gala, if you're not going to, we would love to give you a tour of one of our facilities and tell you what we do, and you'll get to see it, and you'll get to meet our kids, and it's pretty extraordinary. But if you're not, and you can give $25 a month, that's a big deal for us. And that's one of those things. If you can give up 2 lattes from Starbucks a month, or a couple packs of cigarettes, or whatever it is, and give it to something that we can promise you, we are. I don't take a salary for what I do.
Yeah.
We are in this for the right reasons. There is very little fat in our organization. We run it like a for-profit business. Money that comes in goes toward helping Arkell build himself into a human being that he would have never been had he not beat the streets.
Yeah. So. That's amazing. And I said yes to it, and I know it's not something you're featuring for your own purposes, but I want to come back and say you don't take a salary for what you do. And to me, the sign of a good organization is somebody who is that says commitment louder than anything, right? And you don't see that all the time in a lot of especially in the NPO world, right?
Yeah.
In fact, there's a lot of criticism towards what some of those salaries can be, and it's not the case, but it's incredible. It's such a part of an indicator on the commitment and how passionate you are, and it obviously the folks that you've brought into this who came in as passionate people. Yeah,
our staff could all be making more money for doing something not as meaningful, but similar in terms of skill set in the for-profit world.
Yeah,
Pat Martinez was a world team member. He was running a business in Colorado that he left to come work for a nonprofit in Chicago.
Wow.
Brad Traviola was the COO of the Big Ten for 13 years. We just pulled Blanca from the private sector. Hannah, who is our development coordinator, is extraordinary. Kathy, has degrees from Princeton, Berkeley, and University of Chicago. And at one point was the CFO of the Aon Corporation, like 30 years ago. I mean, she's same with Justin. I mean, so everybody is there for the right reasons. Adam, Larry, all of our guys, all of our people. And so what it creates is a really culture of selflessness. And, when a kid is having a traumatic episode at 10 o'clock at night on Friday, everybody's available. We walk out of the movies, we walk out of dinner with our our spouse. I mean, it's part of our life, and it's part of what you sign up for. When Jesse Thelke, our new guy, comes in, this is what we want him to know, and I think he's about it. You know what I mean? But you got to be ready to work when you're called upon, because kids need help. So
it's incredible. So I have a final question, and I asked this to the traditional businesses as well. And I thought it'd be interesting. Is in your world, it's donations. If somebody were to give a $10 million check to Beat the Streets,
what would we do with it?
what would you do with it?
Start an endowment. So I am finishing. I'm not quite there yet, but we're about 3/4 of the way, almost 80% of the way. Well, it depends. I've been waiting on pressing for commitments. A couple guys I know are going to make commitments because of the stock market right now. So I'm waiting a couple weeks. But I'm going to finish this campaign that's going to help pay for our new facilities for the next 5 to 10 years. It'll probably cover about 7 or 8 years of overhead and capital improvements. And then I'm going to start an endowment. And my goal is to have $10 million plus, and I want to leave Beat the Streets when it's my time to go. My goal is that Beat the Streets will be around when my kids' are here, and their kids are here, and it is something that is doing enough good in the world that I'm willing to put my own money towards, and really spend the next several years building an endowment. So first thing first, we would create an endowment that would help Beat the Streets exist and continue to do great work in perpetuity.
Incredible.
So that's my goal. If there is a $10 million person out there, we put it to great use. My goal is to not enable, right? Is to create an endowment that's big enough that whatever we're taking off the top 5-10% is additive, but it doesn't create a crutch, because if and when I go away, I'm the chief fundraiser. Hannah and Blanca are incredible. They're doing great work, and they're really growing in their world. But I do most of the major gifts at this point. And when I walk away, what does that look like? I've been so ingrained, and so much of it has been, I've pulled out of the day to day with a lot of the programming and the coaching and all that stuff. But now what happens when I walk away permanently? And at some point that's going to happen, right? So I'm very much thinking about that. I'm part of a Vistage business group that's really pushed me to think about succession planning, and so the plan is in the next 5 to 10 years build a real endowment that can help Chicago kids for generations.
That's awesome. Well, I want to thank you for that vision, and just honestly, thank you for the organization that you've built with the people. The just impact you're having in the city is just incredible. And I gotta say, I don't think there's a person that will listen to this conversation. It will change their day, at least.
that made my day. Thank you for saying that.
Very, very inspirational individual, and just what you're helping others accomplish is just amazing. So
I appreciate you having me and giving us a platform. I appreciate your commitment to Chicago's kids.
100%. Well, if anything else, we'll see you at the gala.
Yes, sir. Thank you.
Awesome.